Good afternoon, and thank each and every one of you for tuning in to the Raymond Hall Show. I am the host, Raymond Hall, and I am here with two very distinguished persons. Our guest co-host for today is Miss Lavada Theus, Lavada Theus. I'm sorry, I keep doing that all wrong.
It's okay.
And we have Mr. Shirley with us. And he's going to be talking to us about the very importance of voting. I'm so happy to have you here. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, on our podcast, SoundCloud. We are live on Facebook, and then you can catch us streaming. Service is the foundation of this nation. No matter what you look at it, it's always been a contribution of service that has led to the nation that we know today. Sometimes things go horrifically wrong, and what people do is put service in so that those things will be no more. We have Mr. James Shirley here today because at one time voting was something that some people could do and other people couldn't do. And just so you'll know, the Voting Rights Act is not something that's permanent. It's something that was voted at one time and it's got to be ratified again at another period. So voting is very important. You know what we're here. We're all about service. Service is a different conversation. We want to take this quick moment to say hello to Mrs. Erica Flynn Walker. She's still on hiatus, so we want to say hello to her and wish her a happy early Mother's Day. And so how are you?
Well, I'm doing wonderful. It's good. It's a great day to be in L.A. It's beautiful outside, and I'm here have an opportunity to interact with people and to share information. Okay. And to Mrs. Walker, you know, I miss you. I miss seeing. I'm sitting in your chair, but I miss you. So hurry and get back. Okay.
And I met this young man a few days ago at the Black Task Force.
Yeah. Higher Learning Task Force.
Higher Learning Task Force. And years ago, there was a lady named Mrs. Lillian Mobley. Okay. And she was such a impressive person because usually you'd go to places and the people would send their heads of state and they just do a soft shoe dance and then they're out of there. Mrs. Mobley wouldn't let them come and just say things. She would have them to give a real accounting of what was going on with their agency, especially when it was adversely affecting the community. So, Mr. Shirley, I want to thank you for coming to the Raymond Hall Show to talk to us about voting on such a short notice. Okay.
It is indeed a pleasure to be here, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, we're going to be talking to Mr. Shirley in depth on various aspects of the voting, and we're going to talk about a few little trending things. Now, you know Mother's Day is coming up, so that's on the top of the list for that's not trending, and it is trending. So you got a whole week to get it together and don't have no excuses. If it wasn't for mothers, none of us would be here. I don't even know what the deal would be, but because of mothers, we're all here. So we want to make sure that we thank them for all of the things that they do. Veterans, we want to thank you for that service. We want to thank you for that service to the nation. We want to thank you for the continued service. The thing is that when you give service, there's an element that's involved. It's called command and commandable. You have to be commandable because a lot of times you're going to be required to give some service that you really don't want to be a part of. But if you're called to give that service or if you're called to do that service, then it's just something that you're going to do. So we want to give everyone that's serving anywhere on the globe, if you're serving in the active military, if you're separated from family, friends, neighbors, loved ones, and all of those kind of things, we want to tell you thank you. But because of your service, the homeland is at rest to be at liberty to do the things that they want to do. And Mr. Shirley says he has an active church life, and we want to thank them because, you know, they make a difference. In some countries, you don't have the freedom to worship as you would choose. But here,
So
you do. Is everything perfect in the nation? Absolutely not. Okay. There was a conversation today because the men in Philadelphia that got arrested got paid. So it was another conversation about them getting paid. I mean, what do you want to do? So is the nation perfect? No, it's not. But we tend to have dialogue about things that pique our interest. And when they pique our interest, that means that there's a possibility for us to make things better for someone else just by having a dialogue with each other. Anything interesting in the CSL?
Well, the most exciting thing was that we just got two of our bills moved forward in the Senate.
Okay.
The Medicare Assisted Living Waiver Program that we're really fighting to enact went from the committee to do pass. And oh my goodness, I didn't really understand how difficult it was to get a piece of legislation through.
Out of committee.
Yeah,
right.
So it came out of committee. Right. So we're like, hey, that's a big step.
Yes.
So we have a couple others, that are making that similar progress.
So now it's headed to the full assembly.
It's heading to the full assembly. This is as of, April 30th. This is the latest legislative report.
Right.
So
now tell us about that. Tell us about that proposal that just...
The one that just moved forward would require the Department of the Health Department to submit to the Federal Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services a request for the renewal of the Assisted Living Waiver Program, that they just wouldn't be able to do it at will. They have to apply. That's one of the areas where they've found abuses in the assisted living program.
So the important thing is that if you think that this is something that would benefit you or someone you know or just benefit the community, then we would invite you to call your assembly person. Go on record to let them know that you support them. What's the AB
2233.
Assembly Bill
2233.
Assembly Bill 2233. And you can go online and look up more about it, look to see who the author is and how it's supported and everything else. So, I am excited about the California Senior Legislature because they focus exclusively on legislation for seniors. And it is so much
focused
needed.
on senior needs.
Okay. If you think you're not going to get there, think again, because all of us are headed there, and that's the grace of life that
you're there before you know it.
You're there before you know it. Okay. All right. So we're going to come up on that first break. I'm a little premature.
Yes. You got about 5 minutes.
Yeah, the clock. It's hard for me to see the clock.
Okay, we got 5 minutes. That's about 2.
We just got through talking about seniors, huh? So I got some of these senior eyes. But maybe we need to see what proposal they have for tired eyes. Okay. So anyway, we want to make
they're
sure.
changing everything in an article I read. So they're having to change the clocks in the schools because the children can't not tell time on a numerical clock. So they're going to go digital. So we need to get you one of those big digital cameras
clock
that light up.
That'll work. That would absolutely work.
We're going back to childhood.
Yes. Okay. Something. Because
we got about 5 minutes.
Yeah. So imagine what I felt when I got to the Marine Corps and they had the 24-hour clock.
Oh my, yes.
Yes. And the man says report to post at 1800.
1800.
What are you talking about? It's all I ever knew was 12 o'clock, and then it's 1 o'clock. Okay, so it's always something.
It's always changing.
It's always changing.
That's why we need a senior legislature to keep us at least abreast of what's happening, because things are changing
all the time.
And when you're a young person, you don't even think about the issues that our seniors are concerned with.
That's true. That's true. But what they remember is they remember Big Mama.
Yes, and that's what we have to rely on. Yes.
Yeah. So.
So everybody needs to, like you said, the kids tell me, stay woke.
Stay woke. Yeah. I was called to issues at the VA, not through the Department of Veterans Affairs. This had to do with a family that needed assistance. And it's so needed because we need those virtual bridges. That's one of the problems. You have these unique medical institutions and systems, and everybody has their lane. But when a veteran needs to move from non-VA facility to a VA facility, how do you transition that? It's you know, they have to go out, go home, get sicker, then come back, get into the VA. Are you registered with the VA? It's just with today's technology and with today's access to information, it looked like we could have some
better communication.
Easier
way to get through a process.
Right.
Is that what you had?
You remember a couple of years ago they had an effort for seamless services.
Oh, yes.
There was a big push for seamless services. So no matter where you were, the transition from getting served in one place or the type of service that you would need from one to another was supposed to be a seamless effort.
And if you went to one, you automatically had that connection to where you really needed to be.
Right.
Okay.
It was a good idea.
Yeah.
It didn't really.
Do they still have it?
It didn't totally come to fruition.
Okay. But it was a good idea.
It was a great idea, you know. But those are the kinds of things we need to work for.
Right.
You know.
Okay.
In today's world.
Yeah. So if you don't just think about it, well, I'm not a senior and it doesn't affect me. That was one of the great questions that we had here at the Raymond Hall show. You know, the show is to address the quality of living for all persons and throughout this nation. If you pull at any blanket, continue to pull the fiber out, eventually that blanket is going to fall apart because you pulled all the fibers. Well, such is with the nation. If you continue to pull us individually, there's no more collectiveness as neighbor and everything else that brings working together to make a nation. So whether you are a young person and you're thinking about this could help your older persons in your family, get involved. You know, get an idea, pass that idea on to someone else, and let's see where it goes. It may be something that will change the nation. Again, Mother's Day is coming up. Go to the webpage, imaluxury.com. There's some very affordable items there. I've gone there myself, and I'm telling you, I'm impressed with some of the things that you can get for family and friends and those kind of things. American Legion Post 109 needs your support, so make sure that you go there. I am super excited about next week's show.
Oh, sounds exciting.
Yeah.
Your Mother's Day guest.
Yeah, yes. I don't know. I don't.
Mother's Day is very special.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm not a big TV person for the certain programmings, but I understand that she, Miss Cole, the actress and the actress. Yeah, Leo King. Thank you. Cleo King is both an actress and an activist.
Oh, okay.
And she has this open mic thing, so I guess I'll learn.
I guess I'll learn about it, too. I'm not familiar with it.
Yeah, but we're excited. So we're going to take a quick break. When we get back, we're going to be talking with Mr. James Shirley, and we're going to be talking about voting, the importance of voting, and how to get involved to make sure that all persons who are eligible to vote will be able to exercise their right to vote. We'll be right back. This is the Raymond Hall Show. And we are back. Thank you for tuning in. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, SoundCloud. And we're live on Thursday from 2 to 3. So if you'd like to chime in, right there on your screen is the call-in number 323-293-3375. Make sure you drop us a line. Let us know what kind of programming that you're interested in or that you would like to hear about, and we will see if we can accommodate you. We welcome all comments, so just hit us up on Twitter and let us know what's on your mind. We are super excited to have our guest, Mr. James Shirley, with us. Okay. And Mr. Shirley is going to be talking to us about voting. And you have some more information on Mr. Shirley.
Oh, yes, I do. And shortly before the program started, Mr. Shirley and I had an opportunity to talk, and I got to learn a little bit about how he became involved in this mission of service. As you know, this is all about service and voting. You know, as public service, that's part of our responsibilities, and I was getting background. So what I learned was, you know, through his work with his fraternity, Alpha Phi Alpha, through his work with his church, Friendship Baptist Church of Yorba Linda, and he's also a senior commissioner for the city of San Dimas. All of these are organizations that have a built-in sort of mission of giving service to others.
Service component.
I mean, it's just wonderful to have you here with us, just, you know, knowing who you are.
Yeah.
Now, professionally, he's a retired Xerox executive for Xerox Corporation. He was responsible for planning, strategizing, negotiating, and renewing contracts for large, medium, and small commercial accounts.
I should have met him when he was when
he was
still
managing all that
active.
money, huh?
Yeah, that's how it should be. He was the man.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mr. Shirley obtained a BS in social science and an MBA in 1977 from the University of California, Irvine. Hired in 1979 by Xerox and retired in August 2015 after 36 years of service in various executive positions.
Wow.
He's active in the community and is actively involved in church activities. Mr. Shirley, welcome. Welcome.
It is indeed a pleasure to be here and be able to provide some services to the community regarding voting. I consider it an honor and a pleasure to be among the two of you as we share information regarding voting.
Okay. Now, first of all, you mentioned something, and you say your fraternity is the oldest black fraternity in the nation.
That is correct.
How old is it?
The fraternity was formed in 1906 by 7 young men in Ithaca, New York, at Cornell University.
Okay. All right. I wanted to go back to that because I want young black men, it's a fraternity, or young men, to pay attention. Sometimes it's good to get connected to something that has been a connection to many other people.
For many years.
You know, you can have questions answered. You can get solutions solved, situations solved once you get the right kind of connections. Okay, so I commend your fraternity for all of the work that they do and those kind of things. So now let's talk about. Give us a little brief history on voting. When it not so much you can touch on the voting history of the country, but I'm so much we want to give a service that would inspire people who maybe don't think so much about voting to get up and vote.
Okay.
So what kind of history would you share with us that maybe would help somebody to get inspired to get up and vote? Why should they vote?
Well, the number one reason why anyone should vote is that voting is a constitutional right and it's a privilege, and it allows you to have a voice in your government in terms of how you're going to be governed, the access you're going to have for education, quality of life, your income, your environment. And that's something that we shouldn't take lightly because we haven't always had the right to vote. And when I share a little bit of history, I think people will understand why it's really important to vote. For example, in 1866, the Civil Rights Act granted citizenship, but not the right to vote to native-born Americans. However, in 1869, Congress passed the 15th Amendment, giving African-American men the right to vote. Now,
African-American men.
African-American men.
Not the women.
Not the women yet. Okay?
Yes, women didn't have the right to vote
Yes.
at all at that point.
Now, since a lot of people really didn't want that to be enforced, we're all aware that they came up with literacy tests, poll taxes, and they would try and intimidate people so that they couldn't vote, and they had the Jim Crow laws.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And in 1964 is when poll taxes was outlawed, and the 24th Amendment was adopted. However, we still had to march and we still had to protest in order to vote. Even though we had the right to vote, states have their own empowerment as to whether or not they're going to implement something.
Correct.
It wasn't until 1965 that Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act into law. 5 years later, in 1970, we had President Richard Nixon who extended the Voting Rights Act. Then in 1975, we had President Gerald Ford who signed another extension of the Voting Rights Act. And in 1982, President Ronald Reagan extended the Voting Rights Act for another 25 years. And most recently, in 2006, George Bush extended the Voting Rights Act in 2006 for an additional 25 years, which means if either the president or the Congress does not extend it again, our right to vote will expire come 2031.
Okay. Did you all pick up on that? I hope you did. While we are engaged in a lot of things in 25 years, the right to vote can be diminished.
And that's why we need to make sure that we vote.
Absolutely.
And be careful where you put your X. So you need to, and I'm so glad you're here, Mr. Shirley, we need to understand what we're voting for. And
yes.
not just, showing up. So I'm waiting. I'm waiting to hear more.
Well, the other thing is that one of the things that happened in 2013 is that, that we've had a lot of southern states that have a history of implementing discriminatory practices that prevent people from voting.
Right.
And we had a case in 2013, which was Shelby versus Eric Holder, where the Supreme Court struck down one of the most powerful tactics in voting, where the southern states who have a history of discrimination no longer has to get their voting requirements changed approved by the federal government. They can go ahead and change it themselves. And as a result, they can move the polls and not tell you about it. A lot of us who are seniors may have to vote via mail. They can change that without letting you know. They can start requiring that you have certain identifications in order to vote. And right now, once Texas did that, a lot of the other southern states jumped on the bandwagon and said, hey, look, we're going to do the same thing. So they're always trying to take the right to vote away.
Okay, but since some of those things have been repealed, so they actually filed, what did they call it? They called it the Southern Strategy. And some of the things have been heard now in the court because that was how they got a chance to kind of move the line.
That is correct, but what the thing that I was talking about is that the Supreme Court said that, a lot of those discriminatory practices are no longer in place now.
Right.
The states can actually go in and change their voting requirements without getting approval from the federal government.
Oh, yeah, I do remember.
That's the critical
that.
part.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
Congress has a chance to change that, but they have not changed it as of yet.
Okay.
Well, we don't expect too much from them, no way. So, moving right along. Okay. So now, if we don't vote, or if we don't put pressure on them to, what I don't understand is that in this day and time, we still deal with this 25 years every year. Why not just have an amendment that says if you're an American citizen, you have the right to vote, and that's the right that everyone has. That's an American citizen, and be done with it.
Well, I think it's going to take a group of people to engage their congresspeople to say that we want this to be a guaranteed right, not something that has to be either approved by either the president or the Congress. And sometimes when you have something that's not due to expire for 25 years, people often think, well, I have time to do this. And we don't have time to do that because that time will go by really fast. Because as you notice, you can implement something, but whoever's in office, they can always repeal it. And we see that happen, as a result of what Obama did, and then you got a new administration in, and they're trying to repeal everything that was done. But that can be done by the vote. That's why the vote is very important. Now, I understand that we have Republicans, we have Democrats, we have independents. I understand that. And I'm not here to say how you should vote. But I think we have to acknowledge that of the three, there's only two political parties that are running the Congress, and that's the Republicans and the Democrats. Now, in the event that we put somebody in office and they decide or they're not doing what they promised, we have another extension of the vote, and that's what's known as a recall. If we put somebody in office and they promise to do something, they don't do it, we can recall them, we can take them out of office. We don't use that enough. Because a lot of people feel as though, well, my vote doesn't count. Your vote does count. And it really counts at the local level, the state level, and the county level. And even at the federal level. Now, the only time where I could understand people saying my vote doesn't count is when we get to the college electoral vote. But that can change. Because there's only 538 delegates, and it only takes 270 delegates in order for the president to become president of the United States. And you can have one president can wind up getting, 3 million more votes than that person, but if they don't get their 270 delegate vote, they don't win.
Well, that's what happened with this last election, right?
But if we vote, we can change that. We can't change anything if we're on the outside. We got to get in the game.
Yes, that is
in order
so
to change that.
And Mr. Shirley, I was one of those people that, and I'm ashamed to admit this, for many years I didn't vote for that same attitude that everybody had. Oh, what difference does it make? I see the difference it makes now, and we should all see the difference it makes. We are in the present situation in this administration because we did not vote. We have to vote. We have to be responsible for our destiny. And the voting privilege that we have, and it's a privilege. It is our right, but it's a privilege. People all over the world don't get a chance to do this. So we have to take charge of our own destiny. Get out there and vote. If you don't like something, stop complaining. Go out there and work the process. So,
I think that everybody should vote. I've been voting ever since I was legally allowed to vote.
When you were a veteran.
Yeah, that's true. But I remember as a kid, people telling me about the poll taxes. And there was another thing that they used to
literacy test.
No, this was saying the bubble test. They used to put a little piece of soap in a jar with some water, shake it up, and they'd have to count the number of bubbles.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah, it was really, and at first I thought they were joking, but I've heard that over and over and over again that they had all these different kinds of tests to keep people from voting. And and I
think that depends on where you grew up too. I sometimes I think I'm from this entitled California environment. We didn't see that, and we didn't have those kind of pressures. And so I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, well,
that no one really was talking about voting.
Yeah, Tennessee, Mississippi.
But it's so important. That's how we got behind in this race. By not participating in the system.
Yeah, we
can look at Alabama. We can make a difference.
Absolutely,
we can make a difference.
And see, the most important thing is that we have to continuously share with our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, seniors, that, there's 4 different generations. You got your silent generation, you got your baby boomers, you got your Generation X, and you got your millennials. We have to collaborate because we all are affected by the vote. And a lot of people say, well, it doesn't affect me. That's not true. It affects all of us. And if we don't engage our elected officials, we will allow a minority group of people to make policies and implement things that will affect the majority.
Right. And that's been going on for quite some time.
Yes.
The people who have they have concentrated the power in just a few people's hands. And that's why when they talked about, and this is another part of the discussion, I like to vote where there's a record of my vote. I like the paper ballot. Okay. The electronic, where the discussion when they first introduced the electronic ballot it was nonsensical. You know, there was no audit way to audit the see if what you voted was actually what the machine interpreted. We all remember Florida with the hanging Chad, and I think that was just something that they did to say, hey, here's why we don't want a paper ballot anymore.
Now, everybody don't know what Florida with the hanging Chad. You're assuming they're old like us. Tell them what that was.
Okay, that's true. With the paper ballot, you had the card.
It was a punch card.
Punch card, yeah, and you had to stick the little thing in there to do it, and evidently it didn't sync properly, so the punch was halfway between this or that.
Yes.
And it was a big issue. People holding up the card saying, "Well, is it this?
Go back and
that?"
hand count them. Yeah, you couldn't read them through the computer. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I think that voting is very important, but I also think that what we need to do is we need to get a handle on how we vote.
Absolutely.
What I was guilty of and have been guilty of for a long time, and I will share this one. I used to just vote straight party line.
Just Democrat.
Just party line. And I pay a little more attention now because there's some fluff on both sides of the fence. Okay.
Well, I think one of the reasons why, in talking with a lot of young people, middle-aged people, and also seniors, they said, well, we spend a lot of time on getting people registered to vote, but we don't sit down and talk to people in terms of how they can make an informed vote.
Right.
We don't have the time doing this program, but I also have another section to where I'd like to be able to show people how they can go and determine what district they're in, how they can pull up who represents them, because when you see who represents you both at the city level, the county level, the state level, and also in the Senate and the House, it changes your whole perception. Because if you don't have people who look like you that's representing you, okay, when they sit down to make these decisions, you can then better understand why your interests may not necessarily be heard.
Right.
Okay? And then also, I'd be able to share with people how you can go in, and all this is via the internet, and you can determine how your congressman or how your senator voted. And there's a difference between the U.S. senator, the state senator, the congressman, okay, and the assemblyman. But you can pull all these people up and you say, I had no idea that these are the people who represent me. I had no idea what district I was in. And then when they find out where the voting power is, they have another term that they use, which is gerrymandering. Okay, and what gerrymandering does for whoever's has the majority, and right now the Republicans have the majority, they can go in and redraw the districts to minimize their opponent's voting power.
Right. Okay,
and if we're aware of that, we can stop that. And a lot of people need to make sure that they know how to contact, which I got information on that. How do I contact my senator or my congressman or my city council? I need their phone number. All that stuff is available. We don't necessarily share that with them.
And I personally find it invigorating to know it because when it gives you a sense of empowerment. When you can pick up the phone and call your congressperson, call your assembly person.
Yes.
Text them, send them a text and say, hey, I don't agree with you. I think that we should be doing this. Or I do agree with you, but we have this problem in our community, to think that for a person to think that they are without hope and don't know or have never picked up the phone to call these people is, that's a task in and of itself to get them to understand. So we've talked about how to be politically engaged in your city, county, state, and national, and we're talking about gerrymandering. Understanding the current ballot measures. Now, are these real measures, or we're just having a general discussion on understanding?
These are real measures, but before I go to that, I'd like to make sure that I share the 5 central issues that affect all of us. Okay. Because a lot of people, because we got different generation, well, that issue doesn't bother me, or that it doesn't affect me. Here's 5 central issues that affect all of us. In terms of energy and environment, that affects all of us. Okay, in terms of the financial policy of this country, that affects all of us. In terms of health care, that affects all of us. Immigration, that affects all of us. Okay, and then trade/jobs, that affects all of us. So if we're trying to galvanize people, okay, when you sit down and you come up with some central issues that affect everybody, everybody can get behind that. Right. Okay? And that should be motivation in and of itself to say, you know what, we got to do some things differently because we all need jobs. We all need health care. And you don't realize that until you get sick. And for people who have pre-existing conditions, the way they're trying to do things now, it would be very difficult for you to get health care. And if you don't have access to health care, you're not going to live long. Right. Okay.
Or at best, bad policy, at best, a poor quality of life. Go ahead.
One of the other things we sort of skipped over is how people can become engaged. Yes. In their cities, in the county, the state. How do you volunteer? How do you get involved? Now, you share your story, and, my story is similar. Out of interest in what was happening in my community, I started going to the neighborhood council meetings from neighborhood council. And
That's good.
To get involved in my, I'm on the Empowerment Congress for the county. Great. Supervisor's office. I became a commissioner. All that is volunteering and getting involved in what is happening in the community that I live in.
But you'd be amazed that a lot of people are not aware of that. Yes. And so, I got a section on that too in terms, we need to make sure we attend our city council meetings, attend the school board meetings. Run for office, okay, join various commissions within your community, okay, which is what you've done and I've done, okay. Keep abreast of bills that are being passed and the impact that it has on you, your family, and your community. Be a change agent. Make sure you vote. Make sure you encourage others to vote. Help others understand the political process and why it's important to work within it, okay, to continuously improve it, because it's continuously improving. And the vote has power if it's used correctly, okay? And the vote can change things for either better or worse. You will determine, not the minority, but the majority should determine how they're going to be governed. But like you said, volunteer to do community work. Volunteer to work at schools, colleges, join committees.
Well, let's dial it back here because it's important that we don't get ahead of ourselves. There's plenty shows that's going to talk to you from talking points. And I need to slow this train down because I need to talk to a certain group of young men and women that agreed to listen because they want to get something out of it. When we talk to young people about voting, they said, well, Mr. Hall, I just got out of prison. Mr. Hall, I've never voted. I've been in and out of jail so long. We, the three of us, you know what I'm saying? We have a sense of duty. What do we say to the young men and women who are misinformed about they can't vote because they have a felony here in California?
My recommendation would be is that whoever represents them either at the city, the state, or the county level to find out what programs, because they do have programs that are available that even though you have a felony, because it doesn't make sense for you to tax that person once that person gets a job and that person can't vote. Because taxation without representation, that's not fair.
Well, I think what I was trying to get to was I think here in California that under
What's
certain
the
conditions
law
you
here?
can vote. The
Well,
law is
not
that
all
you can vote.
states are the same.
No, but I was
So what's
speaking
the
of
law here?
the law here is that they can
If
vote.
They,
They
if
can.
they're a felon, they
They
can vote.
Yeah.
They can vote.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
Under
again,
certain-
to get the specifics, it would be really important to get in contact with their local representative, because that's what we're paying them for them to keep us
Yes.
abreast as to, hey, this is my situation. What kind of programs are available for me so that I don't go back to prison.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but when you have these for-profit prisons, they're not interested in rehabilitating
Keeping you out,
people
no.
because therefore it couldn't be a for-profit prison. When you're doing something for profit, it's with the understanding that when I let you out, I'm expecting you to come back.
Well-
So that the rate of recidivism is about 98%.
I work closely in various ways with that population, and the deck is stacked, but we want to stay with the voting thing. And actually, there are people that go inside of the jails that help with voting registration and those kind of things. The point that I'm trying to make to the millennials and the people who think that they can't vote, look into your situation. That's what Mr. Shirley is, and that's what Lavada is saying. Look into your situation. Don't just assume because something is in your past that you can't vote. You may be able to vote. Now, this show has the possibility of going around the world, so it may be that in some states you cannot vote right now. So maybe one of the things that you want to work to try to attain is to put yourself in a position where at another point in time you will be able to vote. If you're free of parole or probation or whatever it is that they say you have to be free of in order to vote. As we get older, people pass on, and it's the people who are left is going to have to shoulder the responsibility to make sure that your vote counts. So know the issues and get involved and vote. So let's shift gears here a minute. Let's talk about takeaway points, what you want people to take away from looking and listening to the show. How to be politically engaged in your city, county, or state. Did we just cover that?
Yes.
Yeah, we did.
Okay. All right. So let's go bottom up. Understand the current ballot measures for 2018.
That's what we were.
Okay. There's currently 4 ballot measures that are going to be on the 2018 midterm election. One is Proposition 68.
Now, this is for the state, this is for the county, this is for the nation. What?
For the state.
For the state, okay.
Okay. And it authorizes bonds for funding parks, natural resource protection, climate adaptation, water quality, supply, and flood protection. Okay. And it's going to be $4 billion in general obligation bonds that the state will issue.
Okay.
Now, the pros for that is that it's good to be able to improve our parks, the habitat for the animals and what have you. But you also have the other people say, well, why would California want to go another $4 million in debt? And they're saying that we shouldn't do it. And so you have some opponents that are saying we need to vote no on it. You have some opponents that say we need to vote yes on it. The biggest concern that people have is that it's $4 million in bond that the state would have to pay out in order to make this happen. Right. And depending on which side of the fence you're on, some people may be for it, some people may be against it. I'm not here to tell you how to vote, but
just what the issues are.
What the issues are, and you can Google this, is Proposition 68.
Okay.
Okay.
And what's another one?
Another one is Proposition 69. And what Proposition 69 does is that it requires certain new transportation revenues be used just for transportation purposes. Okay.
Now, when you mean transportation purposes, you mean better roads?
Better roads, the
more
infrastructure.
Buses, more,
yes. And there are some people who feel that, and there's no fiscal impact here, but some people feel is that the city, the county, and the state, they often divert funds from one budget
stream,
and put it into another budget.
else.
Okay,
Right.
and what they're saying with Proposition 69 is that a yes vote would mean that it would be restricted to where it's just going to be used just for transportation, the roads, the infrastructure, the bridges. Trying to get maybe more gold line, blue lines, or what have you. Mm-hmm. So either a yes vote on it or a no vote on it, and you have. The League of Women Voters, California Chamber of Commerce, the NAACP, and the Congress of California Seniors who are for it. Mm-hmm. Okay, but you also have, Katie Massengale, who's the California State Assembly office, who's against it. Mm. Okay. So, again, I would strongly recommend that people Google it so that you can be able to make a more informed decision. Right. And if there's something that's not clear, that's why it's good when we can have shows like this or either town hall meetings at various locations where we can get the clarification that people might need.
Right. Well, I'll tell you this: anybody that has hit a pothole, I'm telling you, those potholes they are very expensive.
Yes.
As far as the repairs to the cars, and physically they're harming because your car hits a pothole and your neck, your head, your nose, your they really need to take care of the potholes.
All right, we have a caller.
We do?
Yes, we do.
Okay, so
there's your earphones.
Let's see. Good afternoon. You're on the air with the Raymond Hall Show.
Hi, Raymond. This is your old reliable.
Hey, Mr. Williams. How are you, my friend?
I'm fine.
Okay.
I'm going to get in right quick and talk to Mrs. Shirley. I heard he was a fraternity. I came in late.
Okay.
What fraternity are you involved with, Mr. Shirley?
Mr. Shirley, can you hear him?
Yes.
He asked you a question.
Okay, now I can hear you.
What fraternity are you in, sir?
I'm with Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, Utah Lambda chapter for Orange County.
Okay, I'm on Omega Psi Phi. Talk to
Is it too loud?
Oh, yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, well, I'm an Omega man.
Okay.
Anyway, I want to say something real fast. You talked about gerrymandering, and I was contemplating that while you all were talking about how they move the line. I'm from Memphis, just like Raymond Hall there. We came from the same era. Mm-hmm. The red and blue states, all that's predicated on population of those states. Am I correct?
Yes.
What can we do to change that situation? Because here in California, I've been here about 40-some years, and with the presidential elections, the federal elections, some things are determined before we even get our vote count. Mm-hmm.
Well, one of the things that we could do is that usually gerrymandering goes into effect, which is contingent upon who the majority is at the time, because they're trying to make sure that they can get reelected. And if you have a certain district that has a powerful block of votes, you can do one or two things. You can either dilute it, okay, by breaking up that district so that they have less power, or you could wind up compacting it, to where you could have maybe two people running for the same district, whereas before they had two separate districts in order to neutralize the voting power. Once we understand that, then we need to try and make sure that we implement legislation that says we shouldn't do that, because the only reason gerrymandering is done is to give one political group an advantage over another, and it's usually to make sure that the incumbents can win re-election. And right now, the Republicans are the ones that's in control.
Excuse me. This I understand locally, and this I understand federally what gerrymandering is. I'm talking about those red and blue states. Okay. In terms of, they thought the election for president was tampered with. Mm-hmm. Okay. All they concentrated on was the majority of red states, and that way they could win the presidential election. Mm-hmm. And if it's, let's say, for instance, you got one of the smaller states that has 6 electoral votes. Okay, sometimes they can count on them, predicated on the party lines, and sometimes before it gets to California, a lot of federal measures, it's already decided.
Right.
And that's the thing I think we have to champion, getting out to vote federally. And on local basis, you're absolutely correct, because we have to be cognizant of what's going on locally in terms of moving the lines of, making one district more Democrat and another district more Republican. And I don't know when that ends in terms of, when they can do this. For instance, if you're in District 9, what predicates that moving of that line? Is it a grace period, or what is that?
Well, I think in terms of determining whether or not a state is going to be red or it's going to be blue, it's really a choice on the individual voters.
Right.
Because let's say I could be a Democrat this year, but maybe I didn't feel as though the Democrats met my needs, and I may decide, well, I'm going to change now and become like a Republican. I mean, that can go back and forth.
Yeah. But generally, once they are declared one or the other, even I noticed that how they talked about a certain state voted for past President Obama, but they still counted it as a red state. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. They counted that was an exceptional, but it's still a conservative state, that kind of thing. Mr. Williams, I want to thank you, my friend, for calling thank you for all. Yes, go ahead.
On the gerrymandering,
isn't
there a state somewhere that took over drawing the districts so they would be drawn by the state and not the political entities? I'm not up on it, but I do remember hearing that, is it Pennsylvania? It was someplace back east.
Well, as I had alluded to earlier, whoever's in control, they have the right to go in and select.
But that state was taking it away from the politicians, and the state legislature drew permanent districts that could not be changed or moved. The people could move, but the district, would remain still 10th district. I'm just using that as an example.
Well, they redrew. Excuse me, Mr. Williams. They redrew a lot in the states. That's why you have this lopsided Republican governors throughout the state.
But that was through political parties. That was not the state that did that.
No,
this thing that it was just recently that I heard that on the news.
Mr. Shirley answered my question. The powers to be determines that.
Right.
Okay, you all have a nice day now.
Okay, my friend. Thanks again. No, what I wanted to say was that the Republicans had redrawn the lines in so many states, and I want to say Democrats, but I'm not necessarily sure it was Democrats. In other words, someone challenged it in courts, and the courts have begun to say, no, you gerrymandered the district, and you need to put it back. Okay. So a couple of them was so bad that even if the Democrats won that particular seat again, they'd have to win by so many seats and so many numbers and that kind of thing, that they would still maintain control even if the Democrats won the popular vote, because they didn't win enough seats to lose control. Gerrymandering is awful. Okay, it's awful, absolutely awful, because it dilutes our vote.
And see, that's why it's very important for us to stay politically engaged, so that when we see something like that, we can't stop a political organization from doing that, but we also have to our advantage is the court, because see, a lot of those federal judges, a lot of the voters don't realize, we put them into office. Those federal judges on the local level, those are not appointed like the Supreme Court is. We vote them in. We can also do a recall and take them out if they're not representing our interests.
Okay. Well, we're going to have to leave it there for today. We are coming up on our last few minutes for the show. Boy, that hour went really, really fast.
Well, it was engaging.
Yes, it was. So what we're going to do with these last few moments, we're going to give Mr. Shirley an opportunity to, do you have any contact information that you want to give the people? You got a web address or contact information you want to share with us?
Unfortunately, I don't have a web address,
Okay.
because I don't have my own organization.
Mm-hmm.
But I do a lot of works like in the community, and I meet at the Lillian Mobley Center every Monday. Which is on Crenshaw Boulevard for the Higher Learning Task Force and also the Health Task Force. Mm-hmm. And the things that I do, I'm working through my church, I'm working through my fraternity, but I don't have like an admin aide or a secretary or anything like that.
So if people wanted to get in touch with you so you could come and talk to their organization about voting, how would they get in touch with you?
I've given you like my email address, and my email address is J as in James, P as in Patrick, Shirley, that's SHIRLEY 5 @gmail.com.
All right. So if you want to contact Mr. Shirley and have him to come out to speak to your organization about voting, once again, that email address
is JPShirley 5 @gmail.com.
All right. And what do you have to say for
final
closing
words?
comments?
This was engaging. I learned something new today because I didn't know the felon thing. Mm-hmm. So I just hope everyone walks away from our show learning something new.
Right.
So this was great for me.
Right. I'm glad to hear that because it's important. Now, I'll tell you why it's important. I'm not saying that there's a pass to anything, but I'm not saying that there's an equal scale. Somebody don't have their finger on the scale, that balance scale. Anytime you are a minority in population, but you are a majority in confinement, prison population, somebody got their hand on the scale somewhere. Mm-hmm. Okay. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that you take a look at what you actually have a right to. If you don't stand up and get up and go and check it out, you don't know whether you do or not. So get up, go check it out, and take pride in voting. Take pride in. I always get my little sticker that says I voted.
Yeah.
I do too.
Yes,
I like that little sticker. Mm-hmm. I put it on the little stub and put it over there with the rest of the little
I like to
thing.
go through the whole process. I don't want to send it in by mail.
No, just go there and vote and put it on.
It's important.
One thing I'd like to share with the audience is that the deadline to vote, whether it's for a recall, special election, or a normal election, is usually 15 days before the actual voting date.
To vote or register?
To
register.
To register.
Right.
To
register to vote.
To register to
Right.
vote.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that information equally as well. We want to thank you for tuning in to the Raymond Hall Show. We want to thank Mr. Williams for calling in. We want to thank all of our supporters, Pastor Lonnie McNamee and all of the wonderful people there at Do Right Christian Center. We want to thank them. I would be remiss without thanking Dr. J. Arthur Rump there at Grant AME Church. We just thank all of the people that's providing all of the services, and spiritual services are needed in the community as well. Yeah. We ask you to tell a friend about the show, like us, and know that we'll be right back here this time next week on the Raymond Hall Show. Next week, our guest is...
Come on,
open mic with
Cleo
King and Dr. Cherie Randolph. Okay. And I heard Dr. Randolph said something that was so emphatic that I have not forgotten it yet. I think Dr. Shirley was there at that. Mr. Shirley was there at that meeting as well. She said that in our community, that 100% of the money that we need is there 100% of the time.
Okay.
We just don't know how to get to it.
I agree with her.
And I agree with that too.
Yeah,
Yes.
100%.
Get it.
Yeah,
I agree.
100% of all of the money that we need is there 100% of the time.
Yes.
Okay. And she talked about the difference of why it's, at some point you shouldn't be talking about a job. She talked about how kids in school and kids in college talks about jobs. But when you get to certain levels, you should be creating career opportunities.
Okay.
Okay, through grants and those kind of things. Very
Very enlightening.
Yes,
enlightening conversation.
Yes.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Oh, okay.
So that's who we'll be
have
here
next
next week, and
week.
we're
Okay,
excited
that's
about
great.
it. And open mic with Miss King.
Miss King.
Okay. And that's going to be our Mother's Day show. We want to thank each and every one of you. It's time for us to get out of here. They love us, but they letting us know your time is over, okay? Thank you. This is Raymond Hall from the Raymond Hall Show. Miss Walker, we miss you. Take
Happy
care.
Mother's
Happy
Day.
Mother's Day. And we will talk to you later. Take care, everybody. Have a good day.
All right.
Bye.